For over 2 decades, Ash Ketchum has remained exactly 10 years old, no matter how many regions he travels or adventures he embarks on. How is this possible in a world that seems to move forward? One popular explanation dives into a darker theory that reimagines Ash's journey as something far more mysterious. Could it all be a coma dream or something beyond life itself? Let's explore this enduring mystery. Ash, eternal youth. Ash Ketchum is 10 years old. He has been 10 years old for over 25 years, hundreds of episodes, 8 regions, countless near-death experiences, and the kid hasn't aged a single day, still 10. But here's where it gets weird. In the very first episode, Ash and Pikachu get caught in a brutal Spearow attack and lightning strike. Immediately after, Ash sees Ho-Oh flying overhead. Ho-Oh, whose Pokedex entry explicitly states that anyone who sees it is granted eternal happiness. Eternal happiness. Or if you're a fan with a dark imagination, eternal stasis. The coma theory says everything after episode 1 is a dream. Ash is unconscious, and the endless adventure with zero consequences is his mind giving him exactly what he wanted forever. It explains why time doesn't pass and why legendary Pokemon treat him like a chosen one. The real reason is obviously marketing. Keep the hero the same age as the target audience, but the coma reading is way more fun and a little too elegant to ignore completely. But if you think Ash's situation is unsettling, wait until you hear what supposedly happened to real children who played the original Pokemon games. Lavender Town Syndrome. This is the internet's most effective horror story ever told about a video game, and the scariest part is how many people still think it's real. The creepypasta goes like this. When Pokemon Red and Green launched in Japan in 1996, the original Lavender Town theme contained hidden binaural beats in high-frequency tones that only children could hear. Hundreds of kids allegedly died by suicide after reaching the town. Game Freak quietly patched the music and nobody talked about it again. Here's the thing, it's completely fabricated. Zero Japanese medical records support any suicide cluster linked to Game Boy usage. The hardware literally couldn't produce subliminal frequencies, even if the developers wanted it to. But people believed it anyway. And the reason is genuinely unsettling. In 1997, the Pokemon anime aired the Porygon episode, which caused real documented seizures in nearly 700 Japanese children through rapid flashing lights. That actually happened, so when a creepypasta claimed a different part of the franchise also physically harmed kids, the mental leap wasn't far. The Porygon incident was the gasoline. Lavender Town Syndrome was just the match. The music itself is legitimately creepy, though. You go from cheerful route themes to what sounds like a funeral dirge written by someone who hates children, but unsettling game music and murder frequency are very different things. I don't know what to tell you, but if fabricated audio mysteries are disturbing, wait until you hear about a theory involving actual bones. Cubone is a baby Kangaskhan. This one hits different because the evidence is just sitting there, staring you in the face, and nobody at Game Freak will confirm or deny it. Every single Pokedex entry for Cubone says the same thing. It wears the skull of its deceased mother. Not a skull, its mother's skull. That's already dark for a franchise marketed at 10-year-olds, but it gets worse when you look at Kangaskhan. Pull up Kangaskhan's design, look at the baby in its pouch. Small, bipedal, stubby little tail, round head. Now look at Cubone without its helmet. Same proportions, same everything. The theory writes itself. If a mother Kangaskhan dies, her baby takes the skull and becomes Cubone. The trauma locks it into a different evolutionary path entirely, eventually becoming Marowak. And here's the thing, rumors have circulated for decades about early development builds containing scrapped Kangaskhan evolution data. No confirmation exists, but the design similarities are too specific to be coincidental. You don't accidentally give two unrelated Pokemon identical baby proportions, and then write where's its dead mother's skull unless something was connecting them. But if you think a baby wearing its mom's bones is disturbing, wait until you hear about the Pokemon that might literally be a dead version of another one entirely. Jinger is a dead Clefable. Pull up an image of Clefable. Now pull up Gengar, place one on top of the other. The silhouettes match almost perfectly. Same body shape, same ear placement, same stubby arms, same rounded feet. It's the kind of thing you can't unsee once someone points it out. And the name Gengar itself? It comes from doppelganger, literally meaning ghostly double. Its Pokedex entries are obsessed with shadows hiding in them, emerging from them, cursing anyone it follows. Clefable is round, pink, angelic, associated with moonlight and gentleness. Gengar is dark, spiky, sinister, a perfect thematic inversion. One is the creature, the other is its shadow-given teeth. But here's where it gets interesting. There's a fan framework proposing that ghost-type Pokemon aren't actually dead spirits at all. They're antimatter beings from the Distortion world, Giratina's realm, mirroring real-world entities with twisted properties. Under that model, Gengar isn't a dead Clefable. It's Clefable's antimatter counterpart, a dark reflection that shares its shape but exists in opposition to everything it represents. Whether you read it as a literal ghost or a dimensional mirror, the visual evidence is right there staring at you. Which brings us to another Pokemon hiding a secret identity, except this one involves a lab, a failed experiment, and a whole lot of pink goo. Ditto is a failed Mew clone. This is the theory that practically confirms itself. You don't need wild leaps, you just need to look at the map. Ditto and Mew shared the same weight, the same size, and in Gen 1, the same pinkish color. Both can use Transform. Mew can learn every TM in the game, making them the only two Pokemon with that kind of universal versatility. But then, you look at where Ditto actually spawns in Red and Blue. The Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island, Cerulean Cave, both locations directly tied to Mewtwo's creation. The Cinnabar Mansion journals document scientists discovering Mew, extracting its DNA, and building Mewtwo. The failed experiments aren't mentioned explicitly, but Ditto is just there, hanging out in the exact building where genetic cloning went horribly wrong. Only one perfect clone emerged, one stable form, Mewtwo. Everything else? Amorphous blobs that could copy other Pokemon but couldn't hold a shape on their own. Unstable genetic material that just kept mimicking whatever it saw. Ditto isn't a species, it's a puddle of failed god left on the laboratory floor. But if you think failed science experiments are unsettling, wait until you hear about the war that wiped out an entire generation of men from the Pokemon world. The Great Pokemon War. Here's something nobody thinks about when they boot up Pokemon Red for the first time. Where are all the dads? Seriously, look around Kanto. Your character has no father, your rival has no father. The towns are populated by old people, children, and criminals. The middle-aged men with families, who should statistically be everywhere, are just gone. Gym leaders and Elite Four members are disproportionately young, as if there's nobody above them to fill those roles. There's no visible government, no military infrastructure, no police force beyond a few officer Jennies scattered around. And then Loudlin Surge, the Vermilion City gym leader, casually drops this line: "Electric Pokemon saved me during the war." That's it. One throwaway sentence confirms that a war happened within living memory, that Pokemon were weaponized in it, and that survival wasn't guaranteed. Suddenly, the demographic gaps make perfect sense. An entire generation of men died in combat, leaving behind widows, orphans, and a power vacuum filled by whoever was strong enough to claim authority. Gym leaders aren't sports figures, they're warlords. The Pokemon League isn't entertainment, it's ritualized combat, a society channeling its wartime instincts into something that doesn't produce more graves. But if you think a missing generation is dark, wait until you hear what your rival lost on the Sebi SS. And Tauted Gary's Raticate died on the SS Anne. This one's gonna hurt. On the SS Anne, your rival throws out a Raticate against you, fully evolved, hitting hard, a legitimate threat, you beat it, move on, no big deal. But the next time you see your rival, he's standing in Pokemon Tower. A graveyard. A building that exists for one reason, to mourn dead Pokemon. And Raticate is gone from his team. Permanently. It never comes back. The theory is simple and brutal. Raticate was fatally injured during your battle, your rival couldn't save it, and he traveled to Lavender Town to bury his partner. You're the one who put it there. Here's what makes this cut deeper than most fan theories. It reframes your rival's entire personality, his aggression, his obsession with strength, his need to become champion at any cost. That's not arrogance, that's grief. He's making sure no Pokemon under his care ever dies again, because he already failed one. Skeptics will point out that trainers swap Pokemon all the time, and the game never shows a gravestone with Raticate's name. Fair. But it also never explains why he's standing in a cemetery looking at you like you took something from him. But if you think one dead Pokemon is dark, wait until you hear the theory about what killed everything else in this world. The Pokemon world is post-nuclear war. Every single Pokemon region maps directly to a real-world location. Kanto is Japan. Unova is New York. Kalos is France. But the ecology in these places is radically different from anything on Earth. Something mutated every living thing on the planet into superpowered creatures. And while Game Freak has never confirmed it, one of the most persistent fan theories is nuclear war. Look at the evidence. Grimer and Mook are literally living toxic sludge. Magnemite is a living magnet. Voltorb is a sentient Pokeball. These aren't what you'd expect from natural selection. They're what you'd expect if some catastrophic event fused living tissue with whatever objects were lying around in the rubble of a dead civilization. And then there's the government situation. No military, no president, no police force beyond one woman copy-pasted across every city. Society is held together by gym leaders and criminal organizations. That's not how a functioning civilization works. That's how a civilization rebuilds after every institution collapsed. But if you think mutant key collectors are disturbing, wait until you hear what ghost Pokemon actually are. Ghost Pokemon are dead humans or Pokemon. This one isn't even really a theory, it's just reading the Pokedex out loud. Yamask's entry straight up says it used to be a human. It retains its memories from when it was alive. It carries a golden mask bearing the face it once had, and sometimes it looks at that mask and cries. That's not subtext, that's text. Phantump is the spirit of a child who died lost in the forest. Froslass is a woman who froze to death on a snowy mountain and came back as a vengeful ice spirit. These are official descriptions from the people who made the game. Then there's Marowak's ghost in Pokemon Tower. Not a ghastly, pretending to be something. The actual lingering soul of a dead Pokemon that you have to calm before it moves on. But here's where it gets complicated. If Yamask is confirmed to be a dead human, where's the line? What about Gengar? What about Haunter? Because other ghost types breed and hatch from eggs like normal species. Ghost type is somehow a metaphysical state of being and a biological classification simultaneously, which is, not ideal for anyone trying to build a consistent ontology. But if dead humans becoming battle creatures unsettles you, wait until you hear about what happened to the kid who caught them all. Red's silence is trauma. Every player character in Pokemon is silent. That's a design choice so you can project yourself onto the protagonist. But what if you took that literally? What if Red genuinely cannot speak? Here's what we know. Red left home at 10, dismantled Team Rocket, became champion, then disappeared. When you find him in Gold and Silver, he's standing alone atop Mount Silver, one of the harshest locations in the game. Level 81 Pikachu, 0 dialogue. Before the battle, you get an ellipsis. After the battle, an ellipsis. Then he vanishes. The theory reframes this as diegetic. Red isn't silent because he's a player avatar anymore. He's silent because the journey hollowed him out. A child who toppled a criminal empire, got replaced by the next kid with a Pokedex, and responded by climbing a frozen mountain to fight anyone strong enough to reach him. That's not mastery. That's withdrawal. There is an alternative reading. Some fans see his silence as transcendence, a trainer so complete he expresses himself only through battle. No words needed. Personally, a 10-year-old standing alone in a blizzard for 3 years leans more needs therapy than achieved enlightenment. But I don't know what to tell you. If one mute kid on a mountain is unsettling, wait until you hear the theory that humans themselves might literally be Pokemon. Humans are a type of Pokemon. Here's the one that breaks the entire franchise if you think about it for more than 30 seconds. Multiple Pokedex entries across generations describe humans literally transforming into Pokemon. Boys becoming Kadabra, women freezing to death and waking up as Froslass. Children's spirits possessing tree stumps to become Phantump. And then there's Yamask. Its Pokedex entry straight up says it used to be a human. It died, became a shadow creature, and now carries a golden mask of its own former face. It still remembers being human. It sometimes looks at the mask and cries, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets complicated. If humans can become Pokemon, then what exactly separates the two? Look at Mr. Mime, Jynx, the entire Hitmon line. These things walk like us, socialize like us, have body plans that mirror ours. The boundary between species isn't a wall, it's a revolving door. That means every time a trainer throws a Pokeball, there's a non-zero chance they're capturing something that used to be somebody's kid. The entire trainer hierarchy only works if you pretend that line is permanent. The Pokedex says it isn't. But if you think the ethics of catching former humans is uncomfortable, wait until we talk about what Professor Oak might actually be to Ash. Professor Oak is Ash's real father. This one runs entirely on vibes, and honestly, the vibes are pretty compelling. Ash's dad is mentioned exactly once in the entire anime, as some guy who left on a Pokemon journey and never came back. That's it. Meanwhile, Professor Oak is over at the Ketchum household every other episode, chatting with Delia, giving Ash life advice, and generally acting like the world's most involved stepfather who forgot to mention the step part. He gave Ash Pikachu. The kid showed up late, missed all 3 starters, and Oak just hands him the electric mouse anyway. That's not standard mentor behavior, that's "I've been waiting for this moment since you were born" behavior. Fans love pointing out how Oak and Delia interact, the warmth, the familiarity. It's all we have a history we're not discussing in front of the children. But here's the thing, there's 0 canonical evidence. Oak mentors multiple trainers, including his own grandson Gary. The franchise keeps Ash's dad deliberately vague so every kid watching can project their own situation onto it. No reveal is coming because the mystery is the point still. The man is always at that house, but if you think absent fathers are suspicious, wait until you hear about a certain old man in Fuchsia City who's been running what might be the most corrupt operation in all of Kanto. The Safari Zone Warden. Let's talk about the most underrated villain in Kanto. Not Giovanni, not even Team Rocket. The Safari Zone Warden. Here's the thing, he controls access to some of the rarest non-legendary Pokemon in the region. Chansey, Tauros, and others you can't find anywhere else. What does he do with this monopoly? Charges you 500 Pokédollars, hands you 30 balls, sets a timer, and says good luck. That's not conservation, that's a business model. Team Rocket gets called the worst for exploiting Pokemon, and fair enough. But this guy built a for-profit hunting ground, wraps it in wildlife preservation talk, and nobody questions it. You're literally throwing rocks at wild animals to stun them before capture and paying for the privilege. The kicker? The game makes you sympathize with him. Oh no, the old man lost his false teeth, how adorable. You do his little fetch quest, get strength, and never stop to realize you just helped turn an ecosystem into a theme park. And here's where it hits hardest. You're complicit. Every player pays the fee, throws the rocks, then walks away. So who's worse? The guy who built the cage or every trainer who lined up to use it? But if a morally shady park warden bugs you, wait till you hear what Arceus did to its own child. Giratina was banished for violence. Everyone calls Giratina the antimatter Pokemon, and sure, that's technically one of its associations, but the Pokédex doesn't say Giratina was banished for being made of antimatter. It says Giratina was banished for its violence, not for what it was, for what it did. That distinction changes everything, because if Giratina is just antimatter personified, it's a science concept with legs. But if it's a god cast into a shadow dimension because it was too violent at the dawn of creation, now you've got Satan. Now you've got a cosmic exile story that mirrors basically every major religion's fallen one narrative. Arceus creates the universe, births 3 dragons, and immediately throws one into a dimensional prison for acting out. That's not physics, that's mythology. But here's where it gets interesting. Giratina doesn't just rot in its cell. In Platinum, when Cyrus tries to unmake reality, Giratina drags him into the distortion world of its own volition. It intervenes. In Legends Arceus, it functions as a cosmic enforcer, and Cynthia straight up calls it a kind soul. So what you actually have is a violent god, punished justly, who slowly became the guardian of the very world that exiled it. That's not evil. That's complex. But if Giratina was merely one piece of Arceus' creation, that raises a much bigger question. What if Arceus itself isn't the whole picture? Arceus did not create everything. Here's the question nobody wants to ask about Pokemon's god: where did the egg come from? Arceus hatched from an egg in a void of nothingness. That's the official story. But an egg implies a biological process, something that existed before Arceus did. You can't hatch from nothing using a concept that requires something to already exist. It's an infinite regress problem dressed up as creation myth, and the games never address it. But it gets bigger than one paradox. Ultra beasts exist, entire dimensions of creatures from ultra space that operate on completely different rules with completely different biology. Did Arceus create those too? Because nothing in the lore says it did. Ultra space isn't presented as part of Arceus' domain. It's presented as something else entirely. Here's what I think the games are actually telling us. The Sinnoh creation myths are exactly that. Myths. The religious stories of one culture in one region. Arceus might be the god of this particular reality, but this particular reality might be one room in an infinite house that nobody built. Legends. Arceus let you meet the thing face to face, and it never clarified whether it made all possible universes or just the one you're standing in. It gave you a phone and some homework, not exactly omnipotent behavior. So the biggest unsolved mystery in Pokemon isn't buried in game code, it's the possibility that even the god of this franchise isn't actually God. That there's something older, something the games haven't shown us yet, and maybe never will. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.